Hi, I'm Steve from Agile, and this is the Agile Gardener. I hope you're having a great week. Mine's been busy. I've been trying to get so much done. And that got me thinking. I often use the term definition of done in my videos, but it dawned on me that I've never actually explained what it is. So today, I'll explain what it is and why it's important, and I'll be sharing the secret behind actually making it work, but that's coming up later. Some people think that the definition of done is the same as acceptance criteria, but no, it's not. Acceptance criteria are the set of conditions or business rules that the functionality being developed needs to satisfy to meet the intent of the product owner or stakeholders. They're also extremely useful for developers since it tells them when they have met the requirement and can then stop coding, and for testers so that they know whether or not the piece of work has passed or failed. I'm sure you have a done column listed on your Scrum or Kanban board. Well, the definition of done, do you know what? I'm going to stop saying that, it's getting very irritating. I'm just going to call it DOD. So the DOD is what needs to be satisfied in order for you to move it into that column, not simply passing the acceptance criteria. So it's basically a list containing a number of things agreed by the team in advance and normally applies to all user stories. Acceptance criteria is just one item on that list. The difference is that the DOD is universal, whereas acceptance criteria is specific to a single user story. So let's take a look at some of the common things found on this list. Acceptance criteria: unit tests, code peer reviewed, code checked in, code deployed to test environment or whatever environments it needs to go to, code documented and commented, documentation for a user story if needed, and that the user story has been shown to the PO or stakeholders and they agree it's met their intent. Also, something that's often forgotten is any company governance or compliance criteria that needs to be adhered to. This is the place to put it in, your DOD. All of these items must either have a pass or a yes next to them in order to meet the DOD and be allowed to move on into the done column. The DOD needs to be visible and accessible to everyone on the team. I said before that the team gets together to create this, but don't get obsessed with it. It's important to have it, but you don't need to go down to the nth degree specifying absolutely everything. Just enough so that the finished piece of work can progress to production or live status. You could think of it as your MVP. Also remember that the DOD is not cast in stone, it can be changed. Inspect and adapt. So when can that happen? Sprint retrospective. This is a great opportunity to make changes like this. So raise it there and agree to change with the team. Now, I mentioned that I'd tell you the secret behind the DOD, and this is really important. I've worked with so many teams that have well-defined DODs but still can't satisfy it. And that's because, here it comes, they don't have a definition of ready. Yes, let's call that the DOR. Yes, another list. And it really is the secret behind the DOD, as it must happen before, well before. As with the DOD, the DOR is a universal list of things that must be true before a user story can go into a sprint or be presented at sprint planning. It's just as important as the DOD, because if you don't have one, it often means that you can't satisfy the DOD. So let's take a look at what we might find on one. Does the story satisfy INVEST? INVEST is an acronym which you may well have heard of before. It stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable. Is that even a word? Estimatable? Small and testable. Independent just means that the stories shouldn't be dependent on each other. When they are, it becomes very difficult to get them to done at the end of the sprint. Negotiable. That just means that we're not writing a business specification or requirements document. It's a user story. And a core part of the user story is the conversations that need to happen with PO and stakeholders. So the scope is not nailed down at the start, it can develop throughout the sprint. Valuable. Well, clearly there has to be value in what we're doing. If there's no value, then why are we doing it? Estimatable. Estimatable. All right, we'll say it's a word for now. It just means that the team have to be able to estimate the piece of work. So whether they're using story points or right sizing. If they can't, it would suggest that maybe the story is too big or too complex. Small. Well, yes, it needs to be small enough to go inside a sprint, but really much smaller than that. We don't just want to do one user story in a sprint, we want to do many, so smaller the better. Testable. Yes, We must be able to test it. If you can't test it, how would you know it works or not? The team has been walked through the user story prior to sprint planning. In other words, we've had a refinement session. The team agrees it can be achieved in a single sprint. Dependencies and constraints have been identified. Must have some acceptance criteria, although it's okay to add to this in the sprint. How the story will be reviewed. This is worth thinking about because it's often more difficult than you think to review certain types of user stories. The PO identified for the user story. This isn't an exhaustive list, and exactly what goes on this depends on the type of work you're doing. So the secret to a successful DoD is having and using the DOR. So invest the time in refinement sessions, as it will pay off big time in both sprint planning and actually getting your work into production at the right time. I hope this has been of some use, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already, as it really will help this channel get off the ground and let me bring you more and better content. I'll see you in the next one.